I know how they have a great camp, but let's talk about someone else from their camp. I wonder why. I mean, from what I understand, Brandao is also from that camp.
Oh yeah, but I think their camp is one of those camps that's so big, they don't always get the attention. It's not always the same coaches. I think fighters have their own little cliques. I think some fighters don't even see each other in the gym because they have their own set of coaches.
I think that might be the case in ATT because I
top
remember
team for sure.
I remember Woodley saying that when he was fighting Lawler, I remember him saying, "I don't even see those guys. I don't even see Lawler. We've never even."
I mean, that's the case at most gyms when you have people contending in the same weight class.
Right.
It was no different when Costa Philippou was with Ray Longo, and you had him in that weight division with Chris Weidman. They trained at different times.
Right.
They never trained together. That kind of makes sense.
And he left.
Yeah, and eventually he left because he saw
Because
himself.
that gym isn't big enough to. It doesn't have it. It's Ray holding that fort down. He has some guys, but he doesn't have that much.
No, what it is though, he was at the time. Philippou was maybe 3 or 4-0 in the UFC at 185. Weidman's already the champion,
Right.
And he sees himself fighting him, so he left. That's what I heard from people. I'm not 100% on that, but I did hear that they never trained at the same time. They didn't spar together.
Yeah,
they saw each other fighting each other in the future.
My guys train with the Belmore guys. I never had a real deep conversation with them about it. I just don't think it's the sort of thing to talk about. If we ever bring them on the show, we'll go in deeper on that. But yeah, I mean, listen, something did happen. They weren't happy, but I don't think that Winklejohn, Winkle something, right?
Yeah, Winklejohn.
Winklejohn is big enough to do that. Can they have their own cliques in that gym?
They do. No,
yeah?
they do.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Greg Jackson's. Yeah, I'm sure.
You have to understand, they have over 100 professional fighters. They have a huge stable, but don't discount the amateur team. Don't think Greg Jackson and Winklejohn could be at the UFCs every weekend at these big shows and also be at the regional shows. They have coaches, Gibson, the striking coach.
Right.
And that was Brandao's situation.
Yeah, they have Izzy, the wrestling coach. They have a ton of coaches. They have Harry St. Ledger and all these guys. I mean, they take on other fighters, not just the biggest guys from Greg Jackson's, but those big guys or girls. Holly
why I brought up Brandao?
Why?
He just fought a day ago.
Last night? Oh, yeah.
No, it wasn't
Russia.
last night, but yeah,
Yeah.
Russia last
Yeah.
night.
That was Brandao's case, by the way. Going back to that, Greg Jackson wasn't even in Brandao's corner. So
yeah, that's a good point. I think he had one of his Brazilian buddies there.
Yeah,
Are you sure he's still with them?
Yeah, he is, because he shouted them out. I think it was at the weigh-ins or something.
All right, so he just had a fight, and it was one of the most disgusting fights I've ever seen.
No, it was a good fight.
No, I'm talking about something else. It's just the way he reacted. He almost got away with a win early, but he couldn't capitalize on his left hook. And then he started losing the fight. And he couldn't even bring the guy down. And then eventually when he brought him down to his guard, he couldn't do anything to him because the guy had hips, he understood grappling. And so he bit him. And he kicked him in the throat while they were down. He ran out.
That was when they were separated.
But the fight was still on.
No, that's when the
ref separated, but the fight was still on.
Yeah.
And if the ref separates you, you go to your mutual corners. He jumped out of the ring and just gave up. And then it was in Dagestan, so Dagestan erupted. Now, those Kafkazi guys, man, they're tough dudes. You're not going to go and disrespect their house. That's not going to happen. They're throwing stuff. And for a second, it looked like Brandao was disrespected. Because I'm like, why is he making this big of a scene? What happened? I'm really interested. I wanted to know. And, with the help of some friends, I found out, the guys who speak Russian. But it was actually reverse.
But
It was actually reversed. You know, he just sore loser, bitched out.
he was in guard and he bit him on the ear. He bit Aliev on the ear.
Right.
So Aliev screamed. At that point, Aliev still didn't do anything. He kept fighting. He just screamed to the ref. He said, "What do you say? Oh, Uncle Syed." He said he's biting my ear or something like that. And the ref took notice, and they had like a small exchange over there. He headbutted him in the chest, and then that's when Brandao was like, "What the hell?" You know, Brandao was like, "What the hell?" He throws his hands up. And he threw his hands up, and Aliev cracked him 3 times, 2 to the body and 1 to the head.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah,
Fast, explosive.
yeah.
It was nice.
Boom, 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 on
boom,
the
boom,
ground,
boom. Yeah,
guard.
it was nice.
And so the rest.
That's what gave him that extra oomph. Then I guess because he couldn't do anything to this guy. Eventually, you know, he wants to blow his shots out early, and if it doesn't work out for him, he's gonna be a sore loser.
That's a mental thing. That's not his cardio. It's not his training. It's a mental thing. I see a very deflated, very not hungry, very lifeless Brandao in his takedowns, in his exchanges, in his heart.
Yeah.
It's not somebody that doesn't have it. It's just it looks like somebody that just doesn't want it anymore.
I'll tell
He's
you,
just there for the payday.
not everybody in jiu-jitsu cares about the takedowns much.
Yes,
not everybody's Jake Shields
when you're from,
or
when
or what do you call it?
When you're
Who
from
just
Greg
fought
Jackson's.
Woodley? Who just fought Woodley? What's his name? Why is it
Damian Meyer.
Damian? Not everybody's like that. You know?
When you're in Greg Jackson's, you're working on everything and you're trying to be the best at everything. And they have grapplers and strikers and wrestlers.
If that's the case, then why are there cliques? Because at my gym, everyone does the same thing. You know, there's separate pad holding, but everybody.
There are levels, you know, to this. Just like not all black belts are created equal.
Right.
It's the same thing. Greg Jackson has so many fighters, and some of them are so high level that you just can't possibly mix them with other guys. They have to train differently. You know, they have these big world championship fights, 5-round fights coming up, and amateur guys don't, or a guy on the prelims doesn't. He's training for 3 5s. If other guys training for 5 5s, they need to break it up.
Yeah, I understand, but listen, if you're not a great takedown guy, I'm putting you in there with my top guys.
Well, that's different. I mean, just to drill wrestling, you have to go with the best wrestlers. You have to show up and do it.
And I've done it.
It's not like Brandao hasn't displayed good wrestling. It's not like he's never good displayed.
Oh, you think he just doesn't have the will anymore?
I mean, look at his UFC career, early UFC career, from the Ultimate Fighter to his first, I don't know.
Maybe he just never had the discipline. He was always a wild.
Maybe that's what it is.
He was always a wild guy.
Maybe that's
he just doesn't have the discipline.
But at one
if things don't go to his way, he just fucking cries.
I watched him fight in Boston live. That's when he was at his best. That 2-3 fight stretch, and I think that fight was like in the middle of his little run. That for me, I watched him. I kept up with him since the Ultimate Fighter. He's improved from the Ultimate Fighter, and then he just started going backwards to what he is today. But that little run that he had, he showed traces of a scary fighter. Heavy hands. He was throwing the right combinations. He was wrestling at the right time. Takedown defense, jiu-jitsu, everything. So he was way better than what he is today. And why I say he's deflated, a deflated version of himself, is because of the lifeless takedowns, no takedown defense. Doesn't even attempt to defend the takedown. He's just falling on his back. And it's not Damian Maia that's a jiu-jitsu specialist. That
some people won't waste their energy on takedowns because they feel totally comfortable in the guard. You know. Listen, I don't know what's in his mind, but. Yeah, I think he just doesn't have the mental discipline. He has the mental fortitude, but if it doesn't go his way, he just breaks down. You know, discipline. You know, when things are tough. What about Darryl Elkins? He was getting his ass whooped by a tough dude.
That guy has a future. He's probably a future title contender. Or
100%.
Yeah,
that guy's serious, and
he came back. That's discipline. You know, you don't always have to be the better tacticianer to win fights. You know, he came back, and that's discipline. And you know, those are fighters. You know, I read something from Bushido the other day. Warriors aren't always the ones who win. Warriors are always the ones who fight, and that's
true.
That's how That's how fighters should look at this thing. I mean, Brandao's not a good example. Most people aren't like Brandao, but that was a pretty dick move on his part, if I may say so myself.